I'm Samantha Wilson, 32, and last Thanksgiving my father threw me out of our family dinner in front of everyone. What he didn't know was that I just sold my tech company for $58 million. The look on his face when he found out, after I blocked their company accounts, was something I'll never forget. Turns out success is the best revenge, especially when they suddenly need something from you. Before I tell you how I went from disowned daughter to the one holding all the cards, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members who only value you when you have something they want. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut, our family looked perfect from the outside. My father, Harold Wilson, worked as a regional manager for an insurance company, while my mother, Grace, stayed home to raise us 3 kids. But behind our freshly painted front door was a different story. Dad ran our household like a business where performance was everything. From an early age, I understood the unspoken hierarchy. My older brother Ethan sat at the top as the golden child, the son who would carry on the Wilson name and legacy. He could do no wrong in Dad's eyes. My younger sister Megan, with her sweet nature and willingness to please, came next. And then there was me, the middle child, always trying to earn approval that never seemed to come. Samantha, AB+, is acceptable for other people's children, not for mine, Dad would say, barely looking up from his newspaper when I proudly showed him my report card filled with top marks and just 1 B+. Meanwhile, Ethan's mixed grades were met with, "That's my boy," balancing academics with sports. That's what colleges want to see. I quickly learned that the traditional paths were the only ones my father respected. When I joined the computer club in 7th grade, Dad scoffed. "Computers are for people who can't handle the real world," he said at dinner while passing the potatoes to Ethan, who had just made the football team. My mother would offer weak defenses. "Harold, Samantha is just exploring her interests," she'd say softly, only to be silenced by his dismissive wave. By high school, I was winning regional technology competitions and developing basic software applications that caught the attention of my teachers. The guidance counselor called my parents in to discuss my extraordinary aptitude and potential for top engineering schools. "Technology is still a risky field," Dad said afterward in the car. "Law, medicine, accounting, these are stable careers. This computer phase will pass." But it wasn't a phase. While my classmates decorated their rooms with band posters, mine featured the latest tech innovations and quotes from female pioneers in computer science. I stayed up late learning coding languages, building small programs, and dreaming of creating something that would change the world. When MIT accepted me with a substantial scholarship, I thought finally, I would see pride in my father's eyes. "Massachusetts is too far," he said instead. "State school would be more practical. You could live at home, save money." My mother, in a rare moment of intervention, whispered to me later, "Go to MIT, Samantha. This is your chance." It was the first time I realized she might have her own regrets about choices not made. The night before I left for college, Dad sat me down for practical advice. "For years to get a degree that might not pan out. You could be setting yourself up for disappointment," he warned. "The tech bubble already burst once. Have a backup plan." I nodded politely, already knowing there would be no backup plan because there would be no failure. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed so tremendously that even my father couldn't diminish it. MIT was liberating. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who saw technology not just as tools, but as solutions to human problems. Each break when I returned home, the distance between my world and my family's grew wider. Dad would interrogate me about job prospects while dismissing my excitement about projects and innovations. "That's nice, but when will it turn into a real career?" became his standard response. By junior year, my visits home became shorter and less frequent. Phone calls with my mother were scheduled when I knew Dad would be at work. Ethan had followed Dad's preferred path into finance and was already being groomed to eventually take over the family's insurance business that Dad had inherited from my grandfather. Megan was in high school, still trying to navigate Dad's expectations. The final break came during my senior year when I declined a safe job offer from a large corporation to pursue my startup idea. The phone call with my father lasted less than 5 minutes. "You're making a huge mistake," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but it'll be my mistake to make. Don't come crying to me when you fail," were his last words before the line went dead. I didn't. In fact, I didn't call at all for nearly 2 years. The first year after graduation was the hardest. While my classmates moved into sleek apartments in San Francisco or Seattle, I shared a cramped 2-bedroom in Cambridge with 3 other aspiring entrepreneurs. My bedroom was barely larger than a closet, but it had enough space for a desk where I spent up to 16 hours a day coding. During the day, I worked as a junior developer for a local tech firm, a job that paid the bills, but did little to advance my real ambitions. Nights and weekends belonged to my passion project, building a more secure communication platform that prioritized user privacy in ways the giant tech companies ignored. 6 months into this exhausting routine, I met Alicia Ramirez during a company hackathon. While everyone else was creating flashy features, Alicia and I connected over our shared concern about digital privacy vulnerabilities. She had an MBA and marketing experience that perfectly complemented my technical skills. "The world doesn't need another social media platform," Alicia said during our first real conversation at a 24-hour diner at 2 a.m. "It needs digital communication that people can trust." By sunrise, Secure Connect was born, at least on paper napkins covered with our frantic notes and diagrams. We spent the next 3 months developing a prototype, working every free hour we had. When we felt ready, we scheduled meetings with angel investors. Our presentation was polished, our prototype functional, our passion undeniable. And we were rejected. 7 times in a row. "Too niche," said one investor. "Privacy doesn't sell products," said another. "Come back when you have users," said a third, not understanding that we needed funding to acquire those users. After the 7th rejection, I found Alicia crying in her car. "Maybe we should give up," she said, wiping away tears. Maybe they're right. That night, I withdrew nearly all my savings, $15,000, and transferred it to our business account. "We don't need them," I told Alicia the next day. "We'll bootstrap until we can prove them wrong." We moved operations to Alicia's studio apartment to cut costs and lived on ramen and coffee while building our platform. We launched a beta version with minimal features but rock-solid security protocols. For marketing, we couldn't afford traditional campaigns, so we targeted tech forums, privacy advocacy groups, and reached out personally to technology journalists who specialized in digital security. Our first breakthrough came when a respected technology blogger with a cult following wrote about us. "Secure Connect represents what big tech has forgotten, that people's private conversations should actually remain private." The article brought our first 5,000 users. Their feedback helped us refine the platform, and their word of mouth brought more users. 6 months after launch, we had 50,000 users and caught the attention of a small venture capital firm specializing in security startups. Their investment, $500,000 for a 10% stake, felt like winning the lottery. We moved into a real office, hired 2 additional developers, and accelerated our growth plans. By the end of year 2, we had 1.5 million users and a reputation as the communication platform for people who valued privacy. Major companies started using Secure Connect for their internal communications. Journalists in politically sensitive regions adopted it to protect sources. Our revenue model was simple. The basic service was free, but enhanced features and business applications required subscription fees. In our 3rd year, we declined acquisition offers from 2 larger tech companies, both wanting to absorb our security protocols into their existing platforms. We knew they would eventually dismantle what made us special. "We didn't come this far to sell our users' trust," I told our now 15-person team after turning down an 8-figure offer. By year 5, Secure Connect had become a major player in secure communications with over 30 million users worldwide. Our company valuation had reached the hundreds of millions, and we were profitable, growing, and still independent. Then Datasphere, one of the largest technology companies in the world, approached us with a different kind of offer. They wanted to acquire Secure Connect, but promised complete operational autonomy and committed to maintaining our privacy standards by contract. Their resources would help us scale globally while preserving our core mission. After months of negotiation and due diligence, we agreed to the acquisition. $58 million, with $29 million to me as the majority shareholder and $20 million to Alicia, with the remainder distributed among our early employees and investors. The deal closed 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Despite the life-changing sum now in my bank account, I decided not to make any dramatic lifestyle changes immediately. I still lived in my modest apartment, still drove my 5-year-old Subaru, and still hadn't told my family about the extent of my success. They knew I had a technology job and that my company was doing okay, but nothing more. Over the years, contact had been minimal, occasional calls with Mom, rare text exchanges with Megan, and almost nothing with Dad except for formal greetings when I happened to call home during times he was there. When Mom called to invite me to Thanksgiving dinner, her voice carried an unusual note of insistence. "It's been 3 years since you've been home for the holidays, Samantha. Your father. Well, he's getting older. We all are. Family should be together for Thanksgiving." Something in her tone made me agree. Perhaps it was time to revisit the past now that I was secure in my present. Maybe, I thought naively, things would be different now. I had no idea how different things would become, but not in the way I had hoped. The drive to my parents' colonial-style home in suburban Connecticut felt like traveling back in time. Each familiar landmark triggered memories, some warm, many difficult. I deliberately left my Tesla at home and rented a Honda Civic for the trip, not ready to answer questions about my financial situation. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Immaculate lawn now dusted with fallen leaves, seasonal wreath on the front door, and the Wilsons' welcome sign my mother had crafted at a neighborhood workshop years ago. I sat in the car for several minutes, gathering courage before finally grabbing my overnight bag and the wine I'd brought. Mom opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug that smelled of pumpkin spice and the same perfume she'd worn throughout my childhood. "You're here," she whispered, holding me a moment longer than necessary. "You look wonderful, honey." Behind her, the house bustled with activity. Voices drifted from the kitchen and living room, more voices than I expected. "I invited the extended family too," Mom explained, noting my surprise. "Uncle Frank and Aunt Diana, Cousin Jill and her husband, and of course Ethan's family. Even Megan brought someone special this year." My stomach tightened. I'd prepared myself for my immediate family, not an audience. Dad appeared from his study, older than I remembered. His hair had grayed completely, and new lines mapped his face. He nodded formally, extending his hand as if greeting a business associate. "Samantha, you made it." I shook his hand, noticing how we defaulted to the same distance we'd established years ago. "Hi, Dad. Thanks for having me." "Your mother's doing," he replied with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's been planning this reunion for weeks." Before the awkwardness could settle, Megan burst into the foyer, her energy instantly lightening the mood. At 26, my sister had blossomed into a confident young woman, no longer the quiet teenager I remembered. "Sam," she squealed, throwing her arms around me. "I can't believe you're actually here. Come meet Tyler, he's in the living room, probably being interrogated by Ethan." As Megan pulled me toward the living room, Mom called after us, "Samantha, your room is ready upstairs." I kept it just as he left it. The living room was crowded with family members I hadn't seen in years. Uncle Frank, Dad's younger brother, had lost most of his hair but none of his boisterous personality. He pumped my hand vigorously. The prodigal niece returns. Still playing with computers in the big city. Before I could answer, Aunt Diana interjected, "Frank, don't start. Let the girl breathe before you begin the Inquisition." She hugged me warmly. "Ignore him, Samantha. We're just happy you're here." Cousin Jill offered a quick embrace while her husband nodded politely. I recognized Megan's boyfriend Tyler from photos she'd shared, tall, kind-faced, with a genuine smile as he shook my hand. Then came the most complicated reunion. Ethan stood by the fireplace, looking every bit the successful financial advisor in his cashmere sweater and designer jeans. Next to him, his wife Natalie maintained her perfect posture, their 2 children, a boy and girl aged about 8 and 6, sitting primly on the sofa in coordinating outfits. "Little sister," Ethan said with his practiced smile. "The mysterious tech guru graces us with her presence." I returned his smile with equal insincerity. "Good to see you too, Ethan." Natalie air-kissed near my cheek. "Samantha, you look comfortable. Travel far today?" "Just from Boston," I replied, knowing she was fishing for details about my life. "Boston's so quaint compared to New York," she said, mentioning their Manhattan apartment for the first time of what would be many that evening. The children, Madison and Connor, offered rehearsed greetings that made me wonder if they'd been coached on how to address their long-absent aunt. I escaped to the kitchen, offering to help Mom with dinner preparations. She assigned me to vegetable chopping, a task safely away from her more complex culinary operations. "Ethan's doing very well," she said, checking something in the oven. "He's been made senior financial advisor at his firm. They bought a weekend house in the Hamptons last summer." I nodded, focusing on creating perfectly uniform carrot pieces. "And Megan's teaching now, 2nd grade. Tyler's in education administration. They're thinking about getting engaged soon." The subtext was clear. My siblings were following traditional paths and meeting expected milestones. "How about you, dear? Any special someone in your life?" "Not currently," I answered. "Work keeps me busy." Mom paused, wooden spoon in hand. "About that, what exactly are you doing these days? Your father mentioned something about a startup." Before I could formulate a response that was honest, but not revealing, Uncle Frank wandered into the kitchen, heading straight for the refrigerator and the beer inside. "Grace, your turkey smells amazing as always," he said, popping open a can. Then, lowering his voice, "Has Harold mentioned anything about the business lately? I've been trying to catch him alone." Mom's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Frank, this is a family holiday. Business talk can wait." Of course, he backpedaled, though I caught the worried glance he shot toward the study where Dad had retreated. As Uncle Frank left, I heard snippets of conversation from the dining room where Natalie was directing her children to set the table. "Aunt Samantha doesn't have children because she's focused on her career," she explained in a tone that suggested this was a cautionary tale rather than a valid choice. "That's why it's important to balance your priorities in life." I gripped the knife tighter, focusing on the rhythmic chopping sound. Mom touched my shoulder gently. "They don't mean anything by it, honey. They just don't understand your world." "And I don't think they want to," I replied quietly. Later, I slipped away to the backyard for fresh air and found Megan there, also seeking refuge. "Too much family already?" she teased, offering me a sip from her hidden flask. I laughed, accepting the peace offering. "It's a lot to take in all at once." "Try living within driving distance," she sighed. "Sunday dinners are mandatory according to Dad. He's been extra tense lately, though no one talks about why." "What's going on?" Megan shrugged. "No idea. But something's up with the family business. Dad and Ethan have been having closed-door meetings and Uncle Frank keeps calling at odd hours." I filed this information away, curious, but not wanting to pry further. We stood in comfortable silence until Mom called everyone for dinner. As we headed inside, Megan squeezed my hand. "I'm really glad you're here, Sam. Whatever happens." Her words felt ominously prophetic as we rejoined the family gathering. The dining room gleamed with Mom's best china and the silver candelabra reserved for special occasions. Steam rose from serving dishes filled with traditional Thanksgiving fare, golden turkey, cranberry sauce, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and 3 different vegetable sides because Mom could never decide which was most popular. Dad took his position at the head of the table, Mom at the opposite end. Ethan and his family sat at Dad's right hand, the position of honor, while Megan, Tyler, and I were arranged on the left. Uncle Frank, Aunt Diana, and Cousin Jill with her husband filled the remaining seats. "Before we eat," Dad announced, "let's join hands for Grace." I reluctantly took Megan's hand on one side and Uncle Frank's clammy palm on the other as Dad began his annual Thanksgiving prayer. Lord, we thank you for this bounty before us and the family gathered to share it. We're grateful for what you've provided to those who work diligently and appreciate what they have, rather than chasing after what they desire. Bless this food to our bodies and help us remember that true success comes from stability and wisdom, not from risk and rebellion. Amen. The pointed messages weren't subtle. I caught Megan's eye roll as everyone echoed, Amen, and reached for serving dishes. The first 15 minutes passed in relative peace, focused on food distribution and initial compliments to Mom's cooking. Then, as if following an invisible script, the conversation turned to everyone's achievements over the past year. Uncle Frank started cautiously. Business has been challenging this year, but we're weathering the storm. Diana's interior design client list keeps growing, though. Aunt Diana smiled modestly. Just a few referrals from satisfied customers. Cousin Jill mentioned a promotion at her accounting firm, while her husband talked about expanding his dental practice. When attention turned to Ethan, he straightened imperceptibly. Actually, we have some exciting news. Baxter and Reynolds is considering me for partnership next year. Dad beamed with undisguised pride. That's fantastic, son. Youngest partner in the firm's history. Potentially, Ethan nodded, soaking in the approval. Nothing's final, but the managing partner took me golfing last weekend. That's usually a good sign. Natalie jumped in. We're already looking at private schools in Manhattan for the children. The waiting lists are atrocious, but Ethan's college roommate sits on the board at Lexington Academy. Mom turned to Megan. And you, dear? How are your students this year? Megan brightened. They're wonderful. We just completed a science project about ecosystems that even got mentioned in the local paper. Dad nodded politely, but without the enthusiasm he'd shown for Ethan's news. Teaching is a noble profession, he said, his standard response to Megan's career updates. Tyler added, Megan's been recognized by the district for her innovative curriculum. There's talk of her presenting at a regional education conference. This earned a slightly more interested nod from Dad before he turned to me. The table fell into expectant silence. And what about you, Samantha? Still with that startup? All eyes shifted to me. I took a careful sip of water, buying time to formulate my response. Yes, Secure Connect is doing well. We've expanded significantly over the past few years. Secure Connect. Uncle Frank perked up. I think I read something about that recently. I tensed slightly. The acquisition news had been in business publications, though not splashed across mainstream media. What exactly does your company do again? Ethan asked, a slight condescension in his tone suggesting whatever it was couldn't possibly compare to financial advising. We develop secure communication technology, I explained. Our platform protects user privacy and data security for individuals and businesses. Dad cut his turkey with methodical precision. Sounds unstable. The tech sector is so volatile. Actually, I countered calmly, digital security is one of the most stable and growing fields right now. Every business needs it, especially with increasing data breaches. Dad made a dismissive sound. Until the next new thing comes along. That's the problem with technology, always changing, no foundation. I felt a familiar tension headache beginning. Change drives innovation, Dad. It's not something to fear. Innovation, he repeated the word like it tasted sour. I prefer proven business models that stand the test of time. Like insurance. Like financial advising. He nodded toward Ethan. The digital economy is the future, I said, trying to keep my voice even. It's not going anywhere. Neither is the need for actual, tangible services, Dad countered. People will always need insurance. They'll always need financial guidance. What happens when people decide they don't need whatever app you've created? It's not an app, it's a communication platform, I corrected. And we have over 30 million users worldwide. This caused a momentary pause at the table. Ethan looked up sharply from his plate. 30 million users? Megan echoed, impressed. I nodded, immediately regretting sharing even this small detail. Users don't equal profits, Dad said dismissively. How many employees do you have? What's your revenue model? Harold, Mom interjected. This isn't a business meeting. Uncle Frank, however, seemed suddenly interested. 30 million is significant. Are you looking for investors? I've been considering diversifying. Dad shot him an irritated look before turning back to me. Frank doesn't understand that user numbers get inflated all the time in tech. It's all smoke and mirrors. Something inside me snapped. 5 years of success, of proving everyone wrong, of building something significant, and still, he couldn't acknowledge it. Our numbers are audited and verified, I said, my voice cooler now. We recently closed a significant acquisition deal. The table went quiet again. Even Ethan seemed caught off guard. Acquisition. Dad's eyes narrowed. You sold your company? I met his gaze steadily. Yes, to Datasphere Technologies. Uncle Frank nearly choked on his wine. Datasphere? The Datasphere? They're one of the largest tech companies in the world. That's the one, I confirmed, watching Dad's expression carefully. For how much? Ethan asked bluntly, earning a sharp look from his wife for the inappropriate question. I hesitated, then decided a partial truth was necessary. Enough to be comfortable for quite some time. Dad's face had reddened slightly. If this acquisition actually happened, it did, I interrupted. 3 weeks ago. Then why are you driving a rental Honda and not broadcasting this supposed success? He challenged, his voice rising. Why haven't we heard anything about this before now? Because my success isn't about impressing others, I replied evenly. And frankly, you've never shown interest in my career before. Don't take that tone with me, Dad warned. If you've had some minor success, good for you. But don't come into my house and start exaggerating to make yourself sound important. I'm not exaggerating, I said, feeling decades of dismissal crystallizing into this moment. Really? His voice dripped with sarcasm. Then why not tell us exactly how much this significant acquisition was for? Since you're supposedly so successful now. The table had gone completely silent. Mom looked distressed, Megan worried. Even Ethan seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I don't need to prove anything to you, I said quietly. I never did. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. That's always been your problem, Samantha. All talk, no substance. Living in a fantasy world of technology while the rest of the family builds real careers and real lives. Harold. Mom gasped. But Dad was on a roll now, years of disapproval pouring out. You walked away from every opportunity one tried to give you. You refused solid career advice. You chased after pipe dreams instead of building something with foundation. And now you come back after barely communicating for years, making outlandish claims about some big business deal? I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate. I think I should go. Sit down, Dad ordered. We're not finished. I replied, surprisingly calm despite my racing heart. Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was delicious. Dad stood as well, his face flushed with anger. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back until you're ready to be honest with this family. I looked around the table. At my mother's distress, Megan's silent support, Ethan's uncomfortable fascination, and the mix of embarrassment and curiosity on everyone else's faces. For what it's worth, I said quietly, the acquisition was for $58 million. My share was $29 million. But you're right about one thing, Dad, I should have been honest much sooner. Honest about the fact that your approval was never going to come, no matter what I achieved. The shock that registered on his face was almost worth the public humiliation. That's a lie, he sputtered. You expect us to believe. I don't care what you believe anymore, I interrupted. That's the freedom that comes with finally accepting that I don't need your validation. Get out, Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. Get out of my house. I grabbed my purse from the sideboard. Goodbye, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. As I walked out, I heard the explosion of voices behind me, questions, exclamations, Mom calling my name. But I didn't turn back. For the first time in my life, I was walking away on my terms, not slinking away in defeat. The cold November air hit my face as I closed the front door behind me, and despite everything, I felt lighter than I had in years. The drive to my hotel was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline still coursing through my system. I'd never spoken to my father that way, never revealed so much in front of the entire family. The dam had broken, and there was no going back. At the hotel, I collapsed onto the bed, emotionally drained but strangely calm. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Megan. Holy shit, Sam. Are you okay? I'm fine, I texted back. Sorry for ruining dinner. Are you kidding? That was the most exciting Thanksgiving we've ever had. Dad is still sputtering. Ethan looks like he swallowed a lemon. Uncle Frank keeps asking if anyone has your business card. Despite everything, I smiled. Then my phone rang. Mom. I hesitated before answering. Samantha. Her voice was thin with worry. Where are you? At the Marriott downtown. I'm fine, Mom. She sighed heavily. I'm so sorry about what happened. Your father was completely out of line. It's okay. It's been building for years. Was it true? She asked hesitantly. What you said about the money? I closed my eyes. Yes. Every word. A long pause followed. I never knew. You never said anything. Would it have mattered to Dad? Another pause. I'd like to think so, but I don't know. He's always had such fixed ideas about success. After promising to call her tomorrow, I ended the call and ordered room service. I needed time to process what had happened and decide my next steps. While waiting for my food, I scrolled through news alerts on my phone and froze. There it was, a business journal had published a detailed article about DataSphere's acquisition of SecureConnect, complete with the sale price and my name prominently featured as the co-founder and majority shareholder. The news was officially public. Within the hour, my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages from family members who had apparently seen the article being shared on social media. LinkedIn connection requests from distant relatives I barely remembered. 3 missed calls from Uncle Frank. I turned my phone to silent and ate my club sandwich in peace. The next morning, I awoke to 47 new notifications. Most surprising was a text from Ethan. Just saw the news. Congratulations. That's seriously impressive. Let's grab coffee before you head back to Boston. Mom had called twice more. Megan had sent several supportive messages. And buried among the notifications was an email from the CEO of Wilson Insurance, my father's company, thanking SecureConnect for their service and mentioning they looked forward to continuing their business relationship. That stopped me cold. I hadn't realized my father's company used our platform. Out of curiosity, I logged into our client dashboard and searched for Wilson Insurance. Indeed, they had been clients for over a year, using our enterprise security package for their internal communications and client data protection. With growing suspicion, I checked who had authorized the account and found Ethan's name. Further investigation revealed they had signed up shortly after a major data breach at a competitor insurance firm had made headlines. They were paying top-tier prices for our most comprehensive security package. As I continued searching our client database, I found more connections. Uncle Frank's struggling real estate development company was also a client. Cousin Jill's accounting firm. Even Natalie's father's law practice. All had become clients within the past 18 months. I was still processing this information when Megan called. You need to know what's happening, she said without preamble. Dad's business is in trouble. Has been for a while, apparently. What kind of trouble? Financial trouble. Ethan let it slip last night after everyone left. Dad mortgaged the house 2 years ago to keep the company afloat. Then they took out more loans to invest in some venture of Ethan's that didn't pan out. The pieces started falling into place. How bad is it? Bad enough that Uncle Frank's been trying to get Dad to let him invest to become a partner. Bad enough that they've been counting on Ethan's potential partnership bonus to bail them out. I thought about the enterprise account Wilson Insurance had with SecureConnect, $50,000 annually for our premium service package, which was actually more than they likely needed for a company their size. My phone pinged with a new email notification. Uncle Frank, with the subject line, Exciting Investment Opportunity. I didn't need to open it to guess the content. There's more, Megan continued. This morning, after that article went viral in our family circles, Dad looked like he'd seen a ghost. He kept saying there must be some mistake, that these tech valuations are all inflated anyway. And Ethan, suddenly your biggest fan. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that he always knew you had potential and how he guided you toward tech early on. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Throughout the day, the messages continued. Congratulations, thinly veiling requests for catch-up meetings. Aunt Diana wondering if I might need interior design services for whatever new home you'll be purchasing. Cousin Jill asking if I needed a family discount on tax preparation for your new financial situation. By evening, the most telling message arrived, a formal email from Ethan detailing a ground floor investment opportunity in a new division of Wilson Insurance focusing on digital transformation. The attached business plan requested $2 million in exchange for a 15% stake. No apology. No acknowledgement of yesterday's blow-up. Just a business proposal as if nothing had happened. I forwarded it to my financial advisor with a simple question, worth considering? Her response came quickly, financials don't add up. Significant existing debt not disclosed in the main proposal, but buried in the appendices. Would not recommend. The final piece of the puzzle came when I decided to check my parents' personal account on Secure Connect and discovered they had created one just hours after I left Thanksgiving dinner. So had Ethan and Natalie. And Uncle Frank. Suddenly, my entire family was very interested in my unstable tech company. I sat back in my hotel room chair, staring at the ceiling. The family that had dismissed my career for years was now not only using my platform, but actively trying to profit from my success. The same father who had kicked me out was running his business on technology one had helped create. The irony was almost too perfect. I picked up my phone and composed a message to my company's client services director. Need to discuss special handling for several accounts. We'll call in the morning. It wasn't about revenge. But it was definitely time to set some boundaries. The morning after Thanksgiving, while most Americans were battling Black Friday crowds, I sat in my hotel room with my laptop open and a fresh sense of purpose. I wasn't angry anymore, just clear-eyed about what needed to happen next. First, I called Alicia, my business partner. Despite the holiday, she picked up immediately. I saw your family drama made it to your contacts list, she said instead of hello. 3 messages from different Wilsons came to the company email overnight. That's actually why I'm calling, I replied, explaining the situation in detail. Alicia listened without interrupting, then said simply, "What do you need from me?" Support for what might seem like a petty move, but is actually about establishing boundaries. You've literally never done anything petty in the years I've known you, she said. What's the plan? I outlined my strategy. Temporarily restrict access to the Wilson family business accounts, not permanently block them, but implement a service review that would pause their access for 72 hours. It was a protocol we sometimes used for accounts showing unusual activity patterns, perfectly justifiable from a business perspective. They'll still have access to their stored data through our emergency backup portal, but with limited functionality, I explained. Nothing that would actually harm their business operations, just inconvenient enough to get their attention. And the personal accounts they just created? Same treatment. I want them to understand that I'm aware of their sudden interest in my company. Alicia was quiet for a moment. You know this is going to force a confrontation. That's the point, I said. We're going to have this conversation, but on my terms this time. After hanging up, I contacted our client services director and legal team to ensure everything was done by the book. By noon, the service review was in place, with formal notifications automatically sent to all affected accounts explaining the temporary restriction and providing access to the limited backup portal. Then I called Megan and suggested lunch. We met at a quiet cafe away from our parents' neighborhood. I need to understand exactly what's happening with Dad's business, I told her after we ordered. The full picture, not just what Ethan let slip. Megan stirred her coffee thoughtfully. It started about 3 years ago. Dad's biggest corporate client took their business to a competitor, which wiped out almost 30% of the company's revenue overnight. Why didn't he diversify his client base? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dad had always believed in the security of established relationships over the risk of expansion. Because that would mean admitting his business model needed updating, Megan said with a knowing look. Instead, he tried to maintain everything as if nothing had changed. Then, about 2 years ago, Ethan convinced him to invest in this revolutionary financial product that was supposed to deliver huge returns. Let me guess, it didn't. Worse than that. They lost almost everything they put in, which was substantial. Dad had to mortgage the house just to keep the business running. Then they took additional loans using the business as collateral. I winced. And now? They're barely staying afloat. The bank has given them until the end of the year to show significant improvement or they'll call in the loans. Mom doesn't even know how bad it is. She thinks they're just going through a temporary cash flow issue. Does Dad blame Ethan for the bad investment? Megan shook her head. That's the crazy part. Dad sees it as market forces beyond their control rather than a fundamental misjudgment. But if Ethan had suggested the same thing, Dad would have never stopped blaming you. The double standard was so familiar it barely stung anymore. There's one more thing, Megan said hesitantly. Dad's health hasn't been great. The stress is getting to him. Mom's worried, but you know Dad. He refuses to acknowledge any weakness. This gave me pause. Whatever boundaries I needed to establish, I didn't want to add undue stress to an already difficult situation. What about you? I asked. How are you handling all this? Megan shrugged. I'm a teacher. My lifestyle never depended on family money. Tyler and I live within our means. We'll be fine regardless of what happens with the business. After lunch, I returned to the hotel to find several increasingly urgent messages waiting. Ethan had discovered the account restriction and was demanding an immediate resolution. Uncle Frank had called 3 times. Even Dad had sent a terse email asking about the service interruption affecting Wilson Insurance. Rather than responding individually, I composed a single message to all of them. I'm aware of the service review affecting your accounts. I'd like to discuss this and other matters in person. I'll be at the Riverfront restaurant tomorrow at noon. This will be the only opportunity to address the situation before I return to Boston. Then I contacted my financial advisor and asked her to prepare a complete analysis of Wilson Insurance's financial situation based on the data they'd provided in their investment proposal. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before making any decisions. That evening, Mom called again. Your father is very upset about something to do with the computer systems at work, she said cautiously. He mentioned your company. Yes, there's a temporary service review happening, I confirmed. Nothing to worry about, just standard security protocol. She was quiet for a moment. This isn't because of what happened yesterday, is it? Not entirely, I answered honestly. But the timing does give us an opportunity to clear the air. I've invited Dad and Ethan to meet with me tomorrow to discuss everything. He's proud, Samantha. Too proud sometimes. I know, Mom. But this isn't about punishing him. It's about establishing a new relationship, one based on mutual respect. Will you come by the house before you leave town? I'd like to see you without all the drama. I promised I would, then spent the evening preparing for what would likely be the most important negotiation of my personal life. The next day, I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, selecting a private table in the back. I dressed professionally, but not ostentatiously. A simple blazer over a blouse and slacks, my standard business attire. I wanted to be taken seriously without flaunting my success. Dad arrived first, exactly on time, his face a careful mask of neutrality. Ethan followed minutes later, then Uncle Frank, looking nervous. I hadn't specifically invited Frank, but I wasn't surprised he'd come. Thank you for meeting me, I began once they were seated. I thought it would be best to address everything at once. Starting with why our business accounts are restricted. Dad asked, his voice tightly controlled. That's part of it, I acknowledged. But first, I want to be clear about something. I'm aware of Wilson Insurance's financial situation. I know about the loans, the mortgage, and the failed investment. Dad's face flushed, while Ethan looked away uncomfortably. That's private company business, Dad said stiffly. It became my business when you started using Secure Connect services, and definitely when Ethan sent me an investment proposal, I replied calmly. A proposal, by the way, that omitted critical information about your company's debt load. Uncle Frank looked sharply at Ethan, who had the grace to look embarrassed. As for the account restrictions, I continued, they're temporary and will be lifted by tomorrow. They were implemented because multiple members of my family created personal accounts immediately after learning about my financial situation, followed by investment solicitations that appeared opportunistic rather than relational. Now wait a minute, Dad began, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I'm not here to embarrass anyone or to hold the past against you. I'm here to establish new parameters for both our family and our business relationships moving forward. I pulled out 3 folders I had prepared and slid them across the table. These contain the terms under which I'm willing to help with Wilson Insurance's financial situation. They're not negotiable, but they are, I believe, more than fair. Dad's hand shook slightly as he opened his folder. I watched his eyes widen as he read the first page. This is a structured loan at below-market interest rates, I confirmed. Enough to clear your current high-interest debt and provide operating capital for 18 months. No equity stake required. But there are conditions. The primary condition, as they would soon read, was family counseling, at least 6 sessions with all of us present. Additionally, I required a formal business consultation to modernize Wilson Insurance's operations, with both Dad and Ethan legally bound to implement the recommended changes. You want to control my company? Dad asked, his voice rising slightly. No, I said firmly. I want to save it. But I won't invest in a business that refuses to adapt, and I won't maintain a relationship with family members who can't acknowledge their past behavior. Ethan was reading through his folder with growing disbelief. These terms are non-negotiable, I repeated. I'm offering financial help, but not without addressing the underlying issues that created this situation, both in the business and in our family. Uncle Frank closed his folder. You've thought this through. I have, I confirmed. The loan offers exceptional terms that you won't find elsewhere. The business consultation will be conducted by top experts in insurance industry modernization. And the family counseling is something we should have done years ago. Dad was still staring at the papers, his expression unreadable. You have until the end of the week to decide, I said, standing up. If you choose not to accept these terms, that's your right. The account restrictions will be lifted tomorrow regardless of your decision. But this is the only financial assistance I'm prepared to offer, and only under these conditions. As I gathered my purse, Dad finally spoke. You've changed. I paused, looking at him directly. I've grown up, Dad. The question is whether our relationship can grow too. I left them sitting there, documents in hand, choices to make. For the first time in my life, I was setting the terms of my engagement with my family. Whatever they decided, I would know I had acted with integrity and from a place of genuine care rather than vindictiveness. It was, I realized as I walked out into the crisp November air, the most empowering feeling I'd ever experienced. 3 days later, I sat at a corner table in La Maison, an upscale French restaurant that had recently opened downtown. I'd chosen the location carefully, neutral territory, but elevated enough to set a tone of importance for this meeting. My family filed in one by one. Mom first, looking nervous, but determined in a dress I'd never seen before. Then Megan and a supportive Tyler. Ethan arrived without Natalie, a promising sign that this would be a genuine family discussion rather than a performance. Dad entered last, his expression guarded but not hostile. After they were seated, a moment of awkward silence fell over the table. Thank you all for coming, I began. I appreciate your willingness to meet like this. Dad cleared his throat. Before we begin, I have something to say. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. These are the signed loan documents, accepting your terms without modification. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite my surprise. I had expected resistance, negotiation attempts, or outright refusal, not immediate acceptance. That's not all, Dad continued, his voice rougher than usual. I owe you an apology, Samantha. A significant one. The table went silent. In 32 years, I had never heard my father apologize to anyone. "I've been wrong about many things," he said slowly. "Wrong about your career choices. Wrong about what constitutes success. And wrong in how I've treated you for most of your adult life." Mom reached over to squeeze his hand encouragingly. "It wasn't easy reading those loan terms," he admitted. "Not because they weren't fair, they were more than fair. But because they forced me to confront how unfair I've been to you." I swallowed the unexpected lump in my throat. "Thank you for saying that." "I was raised to believe there was only one path to success," Dad continued. "My father hammered that into me, and I did the same to my children. I pushed Ethan toward what I understood, traditional finance. I accepted Megan's teaching career because it was conventional. But your path." He shook his head. "I didn't understand it, so I dismissed it." "We both made mistakes," Ethan added unexpectedly. "I should have stood up for you more." Instead, I enjoyed being the favorite and reinforced Dad's biases. Megan smiled at me across the table. "I always knew you'd show them eventually." Mom dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "I should have been stronger, Samantha. I should have supported you more openly instead of just in private moments. I let fear guide me for too long, fear of disrupting the family, fear of challenging your father. That was my failure. We're all responsible for our own actions," I said gently. "And now we all have the opportunity to create something better." Our server arrived with champagne I'd pre-ordered, giving us a moment to collect ourselves as glasses were distributed. "I'd like to propose a toast," Dad said, raising his glass. "To my daughter Samantha, whose success came not despite my lack of support, but because she had the courage to follow her own path. I am very proud of you." The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. After we clinked glasses and the emotional moment passed, we began discussing practical matters. The family counseling sessions would begin next week. The business consultation for Wilson Insurance was already scheduled, with a team of industry experts ready to help modernize their operations and digital security. "We've reviewed the preliminary recommendations," Ethan said, with new humility in his tone. "They make a lot of sense. We should have updated our systems years ago." "Change isn't easy," I acknowledged. "But it's necessary for growth." As dinner progressed, we outlined additional plans. I would establish education trusts for Ethan's children and any future grandchildren in the family. Mom shared her long-suppressed dream of opening a small bookstore, which I immediately offered to help finance. Even Dad seemed energized by the possibility of transforming the family business rather than just trying to save it. "What about you?" Mom asked during dessert. "Will you stay in Boston or move somewhere new now?" "I'm considering my options," I replied. The acquisition included a 2-year consulting contract with Datasphere, but after that, I might want to start something new. "Whatever you decide," Dad said, "I hope you'll keep us informed this time. I'd like to know what's happening in your life, even if I don't always understand the technical details." "I'd like that too," I said, meaning it. 6 months later, the changes in our family were remarkable. The weekly counseling sessions had been difficult but transformative, bringing to light decades of unspoken expectations, disappointments, and misunderstandings. We'd learned to communicate more openly, to express appreciation more freely, and to respect our different paths. Wilson Insurance was thriving under its new business model, with updated systems and a growing client base. Dad had embraced the changes with surprising enthusiasm once he saw the positive results. Ethan had matured, finding greater satisfaction in building something sustainable than in chasing status symbols. Mom's bookstore was small but charming, already becoming a neighborhood fixture. She glowed with a new confidence I'd never seen during my childhood. As for me, I'd maintained my modest lifestyle, but allowed myself a few meaningful luxuries. A lakeside cabin where I could work remotely surrounded by nature, donations to technology education programs for underprivileged girls, and the freedom to explore new ideas without financial pressure. The family that gathered for the following Thanksgiving bore little resemblance to the one that had fractured the year before. We laughed more easily, listened more attentively, and supported each other more genuinely. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside as everyone else moved to the living room for coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately," he said. For most of my life, I thought it was about maintaining traditions, following established paths. Now I realize it's about growth, having the wisdom to recognize when change is needed and the courage to embrace it. That's a pretty profound realization, I said, smiling. I had a profound teacher, he replied, putting his arm around my shoulders in a rare display of affection. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when you had every reason to. As we joined the others, I reflected on everything that had happened since that disastrous Thanksgiving a year ago. The money hadn't changed me, it had simply revealed the true nature of my relationships and given me the leverage to transform them. The greatest wealth I'd gained wasn't in my bank account. It was in finally having a family that saw me for who I really was and valued me not for what I could provide, but simply because I was theirs. So that's my story. From being kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner to rebuilding my family on a foundation of genuine respect and love. I didn't use my success to punish them, I used it as a tool to heal what had been broken for too long. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family who didn't believe in you? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found something valuable in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of transformation and growth. Remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with those we love most, but often, they're also the most necessary. Thank you for listening, and may your own family journeys lead to healing, not just success.